The secret life unveiled. The room sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the soft glow of champagne flutes, laughter bouncing off marble walls. But beneath the glamour, something fragile trembled. Cameras hidden in corners captured every smile, every toast, every polite nod, but one man controlled the angles, the words, the interactions. With an almost obsessive precision, the husband moved through the crowd like a conductor, orchestrating attention, ensuring no one lingered too long, near a presence he refused to share. His status, his wealth, his carefully curated charm, all masks for the obsession that dictated the rhythms of this party. She was there, glimpsed in fragments, her dress catching the light, her profile poised, her hands folded politely, but the audience could sense the isolation in her posture, the subtle tension in the way she moved. She had learned to exist within the boundaries he drew, invisible yet ever present, constrained by rules that no one else questioned. The husband's entitlement framed a space like walls made of glass, transparent to outsiders, suffocating to her, and entirely under his control. Every interaction he engineered revealed a man convinced of his own invincibility, a villain cloaked in civility. He smiled, he directed, he corrected, ensuring her absence was noticed only as absence, that her voice would never rise above the polite murmur of the party. And yet, in those brief flashes of light across her face, something hovered in, awareness that life cannot be fully contained by walls, no matter how gilded, no matter how carefully hidden. The audience could feel it in the way the staff shifted uneasily under his gaze, how whispers of his perfectionism and insistence on control passed from one guest to another. Luxury was everywhere, but authenticity was absent. The stakes of secrecy hung in the air, a tension invisible yet palpable, as if the very champagne bubbles carried it, rising and breaking quietly. Something essential had been suppressed, and the air itself seemed to sense it. And in that carefully curated paradise of etiquette and opulence, a subtle current of defiance had already begun to stir. One misstep, one choice, one quiet assertion, could unravel the performance he had so meticulously constructed. The guests, oblivious to the true drama unfolding behind smiles and sparkling flutes, moved through the party unaware that the night they celebrated would soon shift irreversibly. But nobody at the party had any idea that tonight, appearances would be shattered in a way no one could ignore. The control gehe moved through the room with effortless authority, whispering instructions that only a few staff dared to obey. Every gesture was calculated, every glance measured. Friends were reminded, subtly, smiles tight, words clipped, of the boundaries he drew, the limits of their interactions with her. Social media was monitored, images approved or erased, posts edited, the narrative of her life rewritten to fit the story he wanted the world to see. He controlled not just her presence, but the perception of her existence itself, shaping reality as though it were clay beneath his hands. The wife navigated the party with quiet precision, smiling when expected, nodding when necessary. Every step constrained by invisible walls constructed from his possessiveness. She endured, but endurance had hardened into resolve. She understood the stakes. To misstep was to invite public humiliation. To defy was to risk the wrath of a man who saw control as love, possession as protection. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in the champagne, the laughter, the elegance, but behind it all, she recognized the chains no one else could see, the subtle oppression hidden behind privilege and charm. The audience could feel the tension in every interaction. The staff shifted uneasily under his scrutiny. Guests hesitated before approaching her, and the man himself radiated an aura of untouchable power. Yet in his obsession, in his need to orchestrate every move, he revealed a fragility masked by wealth and status. He was a villain defined not by violence, but by ego and meticulous control. A reminder that possession can masquerade as care, and authority can be weaponized in ways both invisible and devastating. The moral outrage builds, quietly, a simmering heat beneath the glittering surface. This is not just one man's cruelty. It is a reflection of systems that allow status to cloak abuse, of a society that applauds power while ignoring the erasure of autonomy. Every whisper, every veiled threat, every erased image underscores a truth often unseen, that women trapped by privilege can be silenced without ever leaving a mark, and yet the human spirit cannot be fully contained. Even as the husband's dominance appears absolute, the audience senses the inevitable fracture. The wife moves through the room, measured and composed, gathering strength beneath a weight of suppression. The tension tightens like a coiled spring. His control is vast, but it is not infinite, and the faintest spark of defiance, the quietest act of self-possession can ignite a transformation no one predicted. Everyone believed he was untouchable, but she was quietly planning a revelation no one saw coming. Whispers behind the curtain, the laughter in the room continued. Bright and effortless, but cracks had begun to appear in the carefully constructed facade. Guests exchanged furtive glances, noticing slight inconsistencies, a hesitant introduction, an unexplained absence, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Staff whispered to each other in hushed tones, their voices low enough to avoid detection, yet heavy with curiosity and unease. The party glittered, yet beneath the surface, everyone began to sense that the story they were witnessing was incomplete, a performance fraying at the edges. She moved through it all with practiced grace, but inside, her mind was alive with a storm of thoughts. Anger simmered beneath the calm exterior, sharp and focused, fueled by years of quiet endurance and unspoken frustration. Determination grew in measured pulses, courage building in tandem with the rhythm of the music, steady and unyielding. Every laugh she forced, every nod she offered, was a mask, a shield against the eyes, trained on her as though she were fragile, as though her agency could be borrowed and returned at someone else's whim. Her humanity, intelligence, self-were resilient, contrasted sharply with his arrogance. The performative charm that had once dominated the room, friends felt it too. A subtle unease as they sensed the layers of manipulation in every exchange, in every curated smile. Questions whispered across glasses of champagne, a ripple of doubt that the husband's power might not be absolute. Even the most composed guests felt the tension coiled tighter with each passing moment, a silent acknowledgement that something unseen was steering the currents of the night. The wife's quiet strength was now the center of gravity, pulling awareness toward her in a way that the husband had not anticipated. A reminder that control is fragile when confronted with clarity and courage. In this web of whispers, the stakes escalated. Every gaze that lingered too long, every word clipped and measured, increased the pressure, sharpening anticipation. The audience can feel the intensity growing, a simmering awareness that the next move could dismantle everything. The wife's thoughts are private yet precise. Each decision weighted with the knowledge that one small act could expose the truth, append assumptions, and reclaim the space that had been denied to her. And then, in the midst of sparkling lights and music, she made a choice that would stop the party in its tracks. The doors swung open, and a ripple of surprise cut through the hum of conversation. She stepped inside, radiant, every movement deliberate, every breath carrying the calm confidence of someone who had been underestimated for too long. Her dress caught the light with understated elegance, and her smile, small but unyielding, suggested nothing less than ownership of the moment. She was not alone. A man walked beside her, not flashy, not ostentatious, but someone whose presence anchored her autonomy. A quiet signal that she was no longer hidden, no longer constrained. A gasp echoed through the room, low at first, then rising, threading its way through clusters of guests. Champagne glasses paused mid-air. Conversations faltered. The husband froze, caught mid-laugh, his carefully curated composure cracking as his eyes tracked her every step. His mind, trained to control, to direct, to predict, could find no script for this. Every ounce of arrogance and assumed dominance collided with the undeniable truth. She had chosen her moment, and it belonged to her. Whispers erupted, quiet but insistent. "Is that? I can't believe she's here." Some guests stifled laughter, unsure whether to be polite or to revel in the drama quietly unfolding. Staff exchanged nervous glances, their loyalty to the husband tested by the audacity of her presence. The room's rhythm slowed, each movement magnified, every expression heightened, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to witness the challenge. Chu had just delivered to the power structure that had kept her invisible. The husband tried to recover, his smile stiffening, his hands subtly tightening around the champagne flute as he calculated, recalculated, and miscalculated all over again. The audience could sense his panic, the strain of arrogance beginning to buckle. He had built an empire of appearances, yet none of it prepared him for her, confident, self-assured, and unapologetically visible. Her presence alone reframed the space, transforming the private defiance she had nurtured into a public statement that could not be ignored. A quiet rebellion made tangible in the eyes of every witness, she moved with measured grace toward the center of the room, the crowd parting, subtly, drawn not by charm, but by the magnetic clarity of her autonomy. Every whisper, every intake of breath, reinforced the narrative unfolding. She had claimed her space, rewritten the story, and reminded everyone that control can never be absolute when the human spirit refuses to be erased. The tension rippled outward, thickening in the air, making every heart in the room beat faster as reality bent around her courage. Because the moment she crossed that threshold, the power dynamic everyone had counted on dissolved instantly. Confrontation and gasp. Husband opened his mouth, intending to reclaim the room with practiced charm, a rehearsed laugh, a smooth word that would erase embarrassment as easily as it erased others' voices before. But the words faltered. His smirk, once unshakable, trembled at the edge. He searched the crowd for support, for validation, for someone to nod at him, to reassure him that his control was intact. But the faces staring back were no longer mirrors of obedience. They were witnesses, wide-eyed, holding back murmurs and startled breaths, sensing the shift that had quietly, inexorably begun. She did not explain. She did not apologize. She simply existed, her posture calm and upright, her gaze steady and unwavering, her presence radiant and unassailable. Every gesture reinforced the truth that she no longer needed his approval to be seen. Her quiet dignity radiated outward, bending the room around her strength. The guests felt it instantly, a force beyond charm, beyond manipulation, beyond wealthy, moral authority that demanded recognition. Whispers of disbelief traveled in hushed currents through the crowd. Friends and acquaintances exchanged glances, measuring their loyalties. Realizing that the man they had assumed ruled this space was now fragile, his power contingent on consent she had withdrawn. The champagne flutes clinked softly, voices lowered, in stifled gasps, and yet the weight of silence pressed heavier than noise. The social stakes had escalated. Observation had become judgment, and judgment tilted unmistakably toward her. The husband's attempts to regain dominance grew desperate. He gestured, forced laughter, repeated names, attempted jokes, each one landing flatter than the last. He could feel the balance slipping as every instinct he had relied on to control others betrayed him. His arrogance, once a shield, had become evidence of fragility. Every eye in the room tracked a mismatch between his expectation and reality, and the tension sharpened like glass under pressure. The wife's presence alone dismantled his authority. She moved through the space without apology, without fear, her autonomy a statement louder than any words he could muster. She had taken what he assumed belonged to him, control, narrative, possession, and quietly reclaimed it. The crowd was no longer Patagoras. They were witnesses to a reversal of power that no one had predicted but everyone recognized. And as he faltered further, searching for a foothold that no longer existed, a realization spread through the room. The man who had controlled appearances, dictated interactions, and erased truths was powerless in the presence of genuine courage. The contrast between his faltering ego and her composed dignity could not have been clearer, nor more instructive. By the time anyone realized what was happening, the man who thought he controlled the narrative was completely exposed. The collapse of facades, the laughter around them continued, but it had lost its rhythm. It sparkled. Conversations fractured into hushed tones, whispers traveling like ripples across the room. Friends exchanged glances, re-evaluating loyalties, wondering how they had missed the signs, questioning what they had assumed was normal. Staff members, once silent observers, now shared subtle looks of recognition, acknowledging the quiet defiance that had altered the party's current. Even the music seemed to falter under the weight of collective awareness, a backdrop to the unraveling of carefully constructed illusions. The husband's composure cracked incrementally. Each attempt to reclaim charm fell flat. His smirk, previously a mask of control, dissolved into taut lines of disbelief. He gestured, but no one mirrored him. He spoke, but his voice lacked authority. Guests who once deferred to his charisma now recoiled subtly, uncertain of how to navigate the sudden imbalance of power. Every gesture of arrogance became evidence of fragility, every breath a reminder that dominance is fleeting when truth enters the room. The veneer of prestige he relied on was brittle, and beneath it, his ego fractured like glass that, The lens of observation widened. This was no longer a story confined to one man, one party, one evening. The spectacle reflected a culture that prizes appearances over authenticity, control over consent, image over humanity. Across wealth, across social circles, across communities, the patterns repeated power wielded to hide, to dominate, to erase voices that dared to exist. Yet in this single moment, the illusion was exposed. The culture of control met the resilience of the human spirit, and it faltered under scrutiny. At the center of this shift stood the wife, quiet but resolute, her dignity radiating as a silent counterpoint to the chaos around her. She did not gloat. She did not mock. She simply existed fully, reclaiming space that had been denied for far too long. Her heroism was understated yet undeniable, a testament to courage that does not need applause to be recognized. Every gesture, every measured glance, every calm breath was a declaration. Truth cannot be hidden indefinitely, and autonomy cannot be contained by wealth or status. Observers felt the transformation subtly, a recalibration of awareness. Eyes opened, judgments shifted, conversations paused. The party continued around them, but it was no longer the same solo confrontations. Whispered reckonings and moral questions hung in the air, a quiet reckoning echoing through the room. The wife's courage illuminated not just one individual, but the invisible boundaries imposed on many, highlighting the profound power of presence, authenticity, and unyielding self-respect. And while the party continued around them, the real transformation had already begun in every stunned witnesses. Perception. The ripple effect. The story didn't stay locked within the walls of that glittering party. It began to move quietly, like a pulse, spreading from whispered conversations to social media feeds, from one phone screen to the next. Friends shared screenshots and comments, recounting the moment with astonishment and admiration. Local bloggers, drawn by the contrast of glamour and quiet defiance, recounted the tale, emphasizing the courage it took to reclaim presence in a world built to erase her. The narrative began to take on a life of its own, no longer just a personal drama, but a reflection of systemic power and resilience. Comments poured in from all directions. This could have been my sister. Finally, someone showed that dignity doesn't need permission. She reminded us that control is never absolute when courage steps forward. Every message, every post, every whispered remark reinforced a collective recognition. Her actions were a blueprint for ordinary people reclaiming agency. They didn't cheer for scandal, they celebrated the humanity she asserted. The quiet revolution that took place in a room where appearances had once ruled. The conversation extended beyond the party. Neighbors talked about it. Colleagues shared their astonishment, and even people who hadn't attended felt the shift. Some felt inspired to reconsider their own boundaries, their own moments of compromise. Others shared their stories of control, of invisibility, of the ways societal status or expectations had muted their voices. Her courage became a mirror, reflecting not only the imbalance of power but also the strength inherent in refusing to be erased. Across digital spaces, the ripple continued. Influencers and advocates used a moment to illustrate broader patterns of control and entitlement, while ordinary people felt a spark of recognition and hope. The wife, once hidden and constrained, had become a symbol of something far greater. The possibility of standing firm in dignity, the quiet authority of self-possession, and the way one moment of courage can ignite awareness in countless others. It was not about fame or spectacle, it was about affirmation, about the quiet revolution of validation and empathy. Each retelling, each shared thought, strengthened the message. Courage has weight. Courage travels. Courage travels. Courage changes perception. Her bravery was no longer contained in that one room. It lived in the hearts of everyone who witnessed, in person or in spirit, the reclaiming of a life, a story, a voice, because her courage wasn't just a personal victory. It resonated with everyone watching, everywhere. The moral echo. True heroism does not always roar. It does not always demand applause or seek recognition. Sometimes, it lives quietly in the moments we refuse to be erased, in the courage it takes to reclaim a life carefully controlled by others. She did not raise her voice. She did not dramatize her defiance, yet every step she took resonated with authority and authenticity. Her armor was not stilled, it was dignity. Her weapon was not anger, it was presence. And in that presence, she shifted the balance of power, proving that courage can be quiet, unassuming, yet undeniably transformative. Across the room, across the room, across the city, across minds far removed from the party's glittering walls. The lesson spread. Power can be veiled in charm, wealth, or status, but it falters when confronted with integrity and resolve. The husband's arrogance collapsed not because of spectacle, not because of gossip, but because someone refused to be invisible, refused to allow a carefully constructed narrative to erase their existence. She embodied a truth that cannot be hidden. Autonomy is sacred. Accountability is necessary. And equality is not negotiable. Her story became more than a private victory. It became a reflection of the courage ordinary people carry, often unseen, often unacknowledged. Every quiet act of defiance, every insistence on self-respect, every refusal to bow to manipulation contributes to a shift in culture, a reclamation of space that should never have been denied. The ripple effects extend far beyond one room, one party, one evening. They travel through conversations, through empathy, through the recognition that even entrenched systems of control can bend when faced with persistent integrity, and yet, the most powerful moments are often subtle. It is in the calm reclaiming of voice, in the steady assertion of presence, in the dignity with which one moves through a world built to erase them. These are the moments that echo, that inspire, that remind us all of the weight and the possibility carried in a single, courageous act. In a world that often hides power behind charm and privilege, sometimes all it takes is one person refusing to be invisible to remind everyone what dignity truly looks like.